said, I might not even be around in 4 years. He said, oh, yeah. Okay. No, I mean,
Although
Yeah.
probably everybody you play with knows that we're going on.
well, one,
It's wet
yeah,
out
but
there.
a couple of us every now and then.
Okay, there we go. It's on. Yep, that sounds pretty good too, Kevin.
Yeah.
I locked the doors, by the way, already.
So just get that anyway.
Good morning, everybody. It's good to see you. I don't know what it is, but the Tuesdays we have class tend to be the worst weather. You know, last month, you remember what happened last month on the Tuesday? We had class, and then that snow squall came in, and we got a couple inches of snow, and everything froze. Because that was the night the ladies were supposed to have their class. You know what's going to happen this evening? It's not going to be as cold, but it's supposed to be basically the same thing. I don't think it's going to freeze. I think you ladies are going to be okay for class. It's not supposed to get down there freezing till the middle of the night, but you know, basically the same kind of deal. Just kind of, yeah.
Ruben went out to clean the
It's
gutters.
Tuesday in West Virginia. Yeah.
Cleaned my gutters out.
Yeah.
Saturday, and that was froze.
The gutters were froze on Saturday.
The water on Saturday.
Yeah, I guess it would have been. It was cold Saturday morning.
But
Yeah.
4:30 in the afternoon on Sunday, because he got up in the 50s, he went and it was thawed out, and he worked on Sunday.
Yeah.
Well,
It's good to have a grandson to send up there.
he's up in Pennsylvania this week, so he didn't do it
Christian Sabbath, isn't it?
Yeah.
Sunday.
What they
He done
say.
this next week.
Yeah. Okay. Let's get started into our class. I've asked Brian to lead us in prayer. So let's all bow our heads and go to God in prayer, and then we'll get into our study.
Our Father in heaven, we're indeed thankful for this morning, for the nice temperature that we have to come out and study another lesson from thy word. And we pray, our Father, as we go into the Psalms this morning, that we'll have a ready understanding to learn those things which you have presented for us. We also thank you, our Father, for our good health, that we're able to be here on such a day. And we thank you, Father, for our teacher, who does such an excellent job in presenting your lessons. We ask you now, our Father, to continue to be with us, guide us, and direct us in all things. In Jesus' name, amen.
Thank you, Brian. We're in the 34th Psalm today, Psalm 34. And as we said before, we're just kind of going through, I'm just kind of picking out the Psalms that I really like, that are, I think, especially meaningful, and ones that are great representatives of the Psalms. As I've mentioned to you before, if I skip one that you want to do, please let me know and we'll do it, okay? We're not going to do them all, because we'll be, doing them 2 a month, and there's 150 of them. We'll be a long time doing them if we do it that way. But if there's one in particular you really want to do, by all means, we'll do it. But today is the 34th Psalm. As we mentioned before, remember we talked about there being acrostic psalms. In other words, they each one of the verses begins with another letter of the Hebrew alphabet all the way through, and there are 22 letters in the Hebrew alphabet. The 34th Psalm is another one of those. All these different ones begin that way, all 22 verses. And for that reason, like I've said to you before, a lot of these Psalms are 22 verses long, or in a multiple of 22. Even the 119th Psalm is 176 verses long. 8 times 22 is 176. And there are 22 8-verse sections of the 119th Psalm. And each one of those 8-verse sections, each one of the lines, 8 verses, begins with each letter of the Hebrew.
22 verses.
No, there are 22 sections. All 22 letters of the Hebrew alphabet are represented. There's 22 8-verse sections. The first 8 verses all begin with the letter Aleph, the first letter of the Hebrew alphabet. Bet is the second letter, and all the verses 9 through 16 all begin with that one all the way through. Anyway, that's a Hebrew literary device that they use, the acrostic. We tend to like poems that rhyme. That's kind of our thing. That's what we do more than anything else, try to rhyme stuff. Most of us that have, we've about all had to study poetry or literature in school, especially high school or college. And for me, the stuff that didn't rhyme didn't stick with me. It just didn't do it because it just wasn't what I was able to latch on to. Doesn't mean it wasn't good, but they didn't really worry about rhyming. But they did do acrostics in which they would do that. They would also do repetition, which we do sometimes in the Psalms. Some of the Psalms do that. They'll begin a certain way, each one of the verses, especially the praise Psalms in the latter part of the book of Psalms. Before we get into this 34th Psalm, if you will look at the top of that, if you've got a heading above the Psalm, mine says of David when he changed his behavior before Abimelech, so they drove him out and went away. Maybe you've got something along those lines. Well, what is that in reference to? Let's go to 1 Samuel 21.
In mine it says he pretended to be insane.
Yeah, that's it. Yeah, that's the text. 1 Samuel 21. We'll start in verse 10 of 1 Samuel 21. First Samuel 21, verse 10, and David rose and fled that day from Saul and went to Achish, the king of Gath. You know what is so interesting about that? What's real interesting about David fleeing from Saul? We knew he fled from Saul, but what's interesting about him going to Gath?
Goliath was from Gath.
Yeah, Goliath is from Gath. Now that's 10 shades of awkward, isn't it? Where are you going to go hide? Goliath's hometown? And this is after Goliath, okay? This is long after David had killed Goliath. And so he goes to hide out in Gath. Now, in all honesty, though, Gath is a brilliant place to go hide because you know what? Saul is not going to go there. That's one of the Philistine cities. So he is going to go hide where Goliath is from in a Philistine stronghold. There's no way that Saul is going there. He's safe from Saul, but he is in massive danger from the Philistines. After all, he killed Goliath. Look at what it says. He arose and went to Achish, the king of Gath. Verse 11, and the servants of Achish said to him, is this not David, the king of the land? Now, what's interesting about that?
Saul's king.
Yeah, he's not king of the land, is he? Now, he is the anointed to be king. He's the king-elect, if you wanted to say that. But he is not the king because Saul still lives. Saul is still the king. But even the Philistines know that David is going to be the king someday. That's pretty amazing. But they look, and the servants, they know who he is. The servants say, is this not David? Did they not sing to one another of him in dances? Saul has struck down his thousands, and David his 10,000s. Do you remember when they sang that? The day after he killed Goliath. Okay? Because when he killed Goliath, and then the Israelites went out and routed the Philistines, and then David left from the battlefield to come back home. When he went through the towns, the city streets, they were singing, Saul has killed his thousands and David his 10,000s.
And that turned to jealousy on Saul.
And that's what turned Saul against him. But you get the irony of this? He is in Gath, And the reason why they sang that song about David is because he killed Goliath. And they're saying, we've heard that song. You know, it's not one they often will sing. It's not one that they like, but they've heard that song. And so is not that David? Then verse 12, and David took these words to heart and was much afraid of Achish, the king of Gath. And he should be. So he changed his behavior before them and pretended to be insane in their hands, and made marks on the doors of the gate, and let the spittle run down his beard. Then Achish said to his servants, behold, you see the man is mad. Why have you brought him to me? And then to me, one of the funniest statements made in the Bible is what he makes after that. He says, do I lack madmen? do I need another crazy man? That you have brought this fellow to behave as a madman in my presence. Shall this fellow come into my house? And David departs and leaves. Goes to the cave of Adullam. Anyway, so David realizes, hey, I'm in trouble. And so he decides to act like a madman. And acts crazy. And because he acts that way, Achish looks at him and says, that can't be David. Because David's not that way. I don't need another madman. If that's who you think it is, get him out of here. And let him get away from my presence. Do I have a lack of madmen? I just like that. Am I needing another one of those? Sometimes I think, if anybody, of course, back in that time, and talk about the village idiot and stuff, and
Many villages had more than one.
yeah, many villages have more than one. And sometimes I have those moments where, like, okay, if anybody's looking for their idiot, they're probably here. When like Walmart on a Saturday or something like that, you just kind of like, wow, they all, let me give you a side note. This is not anything to do with class, but here's one of my thoughts about why there's so many crazies in the world. Because all through human history, everybody's village had an idiot. Okay? Well, now, they all get on the internet. And you know what they find? Each other. And all of a sudden, there are thousands of them. And they think that there's something to what they're saying. There's legitimacy to what they're saying. But all it is there's one from here, one from there, one from there. And all of a sudden they're in a group and they all have the same thoughts. And so they do things like storm Area 54 and stuff like that. And they'll go do all these crazy things. And they'll get together and form a cult or whatever. But all they really are is just a village idiot. And they got a website. And they're all able to connect.
The American Indians had almost every society. When someone was insane, they didn't kill them. And a lot of times when a white man was captured by the Indians, they would feign madness. They just let him run around, and then they'd usually escape from him. I think Daniel Boone did it one time.
Well, that'd be a good way to do it.
That's all the time.
I'm not
Yeah.
thinking it.
Yeah.
You have to ask Brian about his village idiot.
Oh, yeah?
He told some guy in New York City that he'd found a town that he needed to go see.
Yeah.
He was really, it was, I don't know where it was, the airport or something. So
Train station.
we're all centralized in one place there. He was just stupid, and he really was an idiot. So activity did something in him. And I called him, I said, I bet they're missing you at home, aren't they? What do you mean? I said, every village has an idiot, and I bet they're missing you.
Yeah.
It's lucky he didn't get shot.
Yeah. Yep.
There's times you have to take a chance.
Okay, let's look at Psalm 34. Verse verse 1 of Psalm 34 is just one of those verses that rolls off the tongue. I just love that verse so much. I will bless the Lord at all times. His praise shall continually be in my mouth. There is a song I've heard that I know that has that is the main part of that song that was sung before. And just what a beautiful statement that is. I will bless the Lord at all times. His praise shall continually be in my mouth. When we put into our mind and our hearts what is good, it benefits us in so many ways. We have probably all gotten a song stuck in our head that we didn't like. And you are afflicted with that for days. And sometimes it can change your attitude if you're not careful. And, it can do that to you. The song that will be an aggravation to you. But the flip side of that is we can get a song stuck in our head that can be a huge blessing to us. In preparation for this class, this song has been stuck in my head the last day or so. And that's a good thing to hear that, to think about that. And so, it is kind of what he's talking about, that I will bless the Lord at all times, and his praise shall continually be in my mouth. Because the more that we have our minds and our hearts filled with what is good and what is praiseworthy and what is right, the more that we will be blessed by it. And so, it is much more easy to be with a good attitude when you've got things like this rolling around in your head than things that are negative, that are angry, that are spiteful or harmful or whatever. That this it does so much more for us than anything else could ever do for us. And what a great thing that is, that David is rolling around in his mind and his heart what we would think of as the Psalms, these praises to God in his mouth. And, that will help you through so much.
Music has always been a very important part of most wars.
Oh, yes.
And especially, the first thing I think of is the Fife and Drum Corps, the Civil War. You ever been where one of those things struck up, the first thing you want to do is jump out and do something?
Right. Well, they had to have a band because it was necessary, because there's too much noise otherwise. We've all seen these war movies where they're yelling at each other and they're firing weapons one after another. I'm like, you've never been around weapons that are being fired. You can't talk. You can't talk. It's too loud. It's way too loud with all these weapons going off. Well, if they're playing music, you can pick up a song occasionally in the course of that at just the right moment when there's a little bit of silence. And of course, back then they didn't have guns to shoot, and so they would have done that. But you would be able to, depending on, no matter where you were on the battlefield, you would know if it is a song of charge or a song of retreat or whatever, and they would be able to do that. It was definitely an important part of that. In a time, of course, when you look at the book of Leviticus, that they at times used trumpets with regard to the things that did at the temple. Well, if you've got 3 million people like there was in Israel's day without a PA system, how are they going to know when you're going to do anything? You can't. It's just impossible. You get more than just a few hundred people, no one's going to hear. So they would have to use things like that to alert people as to what they're going to do and when they're going to do it and all those kinds of things. It would just be necessary to do that. And so they would. But just think about what a great blessing that is, that the music would change and be in his mouth at all
You
times.
could be 2 hills over from that fife and drum corps, and you know exactly what the main
Yes.
people's doing.
Yes, exactly. And that made such an important thing. And we all, I've never really known anybody that didn't like music of some kind. We may not share an interest in what kind of music that is. We have different opinions on that. But there's really nobody that doesn't like music of some kind. And music shapes us and changes us probably more than just about anything else on a recurring basis. The music we listen to, the music, and in worship, there's nothing more intimate that we do in worship than our singing. Because much of what we do in worship is one person listening, other people listening to one person. Whether it's leading us in a prayer, or a class, or a sermon, or something along those lines. But singing, we all do together. And the product, if you will, that we produce is of all of us singing together. And so all of us blended together. Now, we all blend our minds and our thoughts, at the communion, and we all take the bread and drink the cup, but we're not all doing that in a visual or an audio way of doing that all together. But our singing is all blended. It's all of us. And what a beautiful thing that is. Jane?
And I've always felt too that it was, of course, the men have the lead roles in the church as it should be, but in singing, we women get to verbally express from our heart.
Absolutely, yeah. And there are songs that we sing that they're not led by a woman, but they have an alto lead or a soprano lead. And so that there is even an element of it that we get to have the ladies sing out even, and where we use the 4-part harmony that we're able to do that. And so, yeah, it's a beautiful, beautiful thing that we're able to do, and it changes us.
Singing sets the tone for the service too.
It absolutely
Because
does.
if you have people not singing out and it's dragging, but you get good singing together.
Right. If we get up there and sing, "Oh, how I love Jesus,"
Yeah.
or "We're marching to Zion." Give us a breathalyzer test if we march like that. If we sing that, then that drags down everything. It does. But if we get up there and "Come we that love the Lord and let our joys be," we get up there and it's peppy. We're marching.
You don't have time to think about it though when you're singing that fast. You drag her through and everybody has time to think, give it some thought.
When is this gonna be over?
Yeah, that's what people think. Anyway.
I don't think we give enough attention to singing in the church that we once did. For one thing, so many kids coming out of school don't know harmonious music anymore, so
Yeah.
we're losing our parts. But if you have a good song service along with a good sermon and a good Bible class on Sunday morning, when you leave here, you are totally rejuvenated
Yeah.
and feel like God is real.
I will tell you that yes, that's very true. I will say to you that, us doing the songs up on the screen where people are looking up has improved the singing in Barrackville a lot. It really has. Second of all, I will say to you that our elders are actively trying to help us in that. Of course, what Andy Robinson did for us. Were you here that Sunday night when Andy came and went through some singing things and led our Sunday evening services, and that was great. Well, we're doing something similar to that this Sunday night. Tommy Tucker's coming over. And so he's going to be here this Sunday night. And then I think he's coming back in a couple weeks and lead Sunday morning, isn't he? Yeah, so he's going to be over here this coming Sunday night and then in a couple weeks as well. And so, yes, your suggestion is on their thoughts too, Kathy. And so, yeah, it's an opportunity to learn, to grow, and to improve our singing. Because, like I say, there's nothing more influential in a lot of ways than that. And so, it's good, I appreciate that our elders are noticing that and trying to be proactive about that and trying to cultivate that.
I'd
Jen?
like to make a statement. A Baptist friend of mine, she said, Jen, I have a tape I want you to hear. She said, it's a man singing a cappella, and I just want you to have it. I said, that's wonderful. And I said, that's what we do all the time, right, in Church of Christ. I said, it's beautiful, isn't it? You know, I thought, how about, what an opportunity, but went in one ear and out the other.
Yeah, yeah. Jen?
I just had a ball a week or two ago, going through some tapes, picking out my songs for my funeral. and the Church of Christ for the camp, I'm about 2004 maybe, one of the tapes. I picked out songs, from the New Martinsville group and the Fairmont group. And then I had a tape of a quartet of 4 men at a place where I went to an elder hostel 5-day thing up in Pennsylvania. I think it was a Mennonite retreat, and these men were probably Mennonites, I don't know, but anyway, it was a cappella. So anyway, I picked out all these songs, and I'm hoping that my daughter can, with her computer, put it all on a tape, because
Well, hope she has some time to do it, though, too.
Yeah.
Yeah, lots of time.
Get a bit of time to do it.
That's
Maybe
kind
a
of
lot of
scary,
new
her and
songs.
I's the same page.
Yeah, well,
I'm getting on you.
but yeah.
And they were all peppy songs.
Good. Good for you. Good for you. That's, yeah. There's a place for all those songs. There really are. And I think that, there's probably nothing in Christianity that draws my mind different places than the songs we sing. There are some songs that are tough for me to sing because I remember my mom singing. There are a couple songs that are tough to sing because I remember, singing them at a difficult time in life. And anyway, it's all that way. All right, we got a lot to cover. We're not going to get into this song. This is a great song. We can't get stuck on verse 1. My soul makes its boast in the Lord. Let the humble hear it and be glad. Oh, magnify the Lord with me, and let us exalt his name together. I sought the Lord, and he answered me, and delivered me from all my fears. Those who look to him are radiant, and their faces shall never be ashamed. This poor man cried, and the Lord heard him, and saved him out of all of his troubles. The angel of the Lord encamps around those who fear him, and delivers them. You can see in those verses very much the context that we looked at. David is concerned. He's in peril. He's afraid for his life. But what happens? God puts his angel around him. He's not concerned. That God answers his prayers. And he says, this poor man cried and the Lord heard him. Saved him out of all of his troubles. What a beautiful and powerful thing that is. When I think about David and I think about all the things that David went through, and I recognize the protective power that God had in his life. And, I can't help but think of the 23rd Psalm where he says, even though I go through the valley of the shadow of death, I will fear no evil because you are with me. David, wherever he was, whatever he's doing, wherever he's going, felt that protective power and help of God in his life. And so, David is one of those people that his writing is so good because he lived it. He's not talking about what it would be like if he were in peril or about if he had a difficult life. He lived it. And so he knows what it was like to be surrounded by the enemy, but yet be surrounded even closer by the angel of the Lord.
Cliff, that only comes when you truly, wholeheartedly give yourself to God.
Absolutely.
If you trust in yourself a little bit more than God, you're never going to have that.
Right. Yeah, you got to have full, complete trust in God to do that. And so, very much, that's what is going on. He has complete trust in God, and so that's the only way that can exist. Kathy?
One of the things too that stands out is, I sought the Lord. The Lord did not seek him. And sometimes I think we sit back and think, well, God knows what's happening to me. He'll take care of it.
Right.
Even David sought the Lord's help.
Mhm. Oh, yes, absolutely.
What was happening to him.
Yeah, of course, in our Sunday morning Bible class, of course, I guess realize you're not in that Sunday morning Bible class, but we're looking at the Holy Spirit, and we looked this last week in Romans chapter 8 about the Spirit interceding for us with groanings too deep for words, and we're talking about that, and also that Jesus intercedes for us, same context. And so we talked about what all that means and looking at all of that, and one of the points that I made is that we never tell God anything in prayer. We don't tell him anything in prayer. We're not informing him of anything. God, if you hadn't noticed, I'm sick or I'm in trouble. Well, God already realized that. And so why do we pray if we don't tell him anything? Well, that's kind of what Kathy's getting at there. God knew that David was in trouble. God knew his situation. And so, why did David need to seek the Lord? Because God wants that out of us. God desires us. And the illustration I used is that we have a 2-year-old sometimes that'll look and they point and grunt. Like that. And what do? We tell them to ask what you want. We know what they want because they've already pointed and grunted. But we want them to ask, and we want them to ask politely. May I please have? Why? Because we're trying to teach them a life skill. It's going to last for the rest of their life. And so, we don't want to just point and grunt when it comes to God. God already knows what we want, what we need. But that's not the avenue in which we do that. We need to ask him. He understands our situation better than we. But what he wants out of us is to care about him and worship him enough that we will ask in a way that honors him, that reverences him, and therefore, when we do that, then he will give to us. And so, we don't inform God of what's going on. And of course, in the context of Romans 8, how God knows what's going on is because his Spirit is inside of us. And so we get that, and that understanding is there. And so for that reason, we pray, because we can communicate to God, because we care enough to bring it to God what it is that is on our heart. Even though he knows what is there already, he wants us to worship him by praying. Prayer is more worship than it is even communication. It is worship to him. And, yes, we communicate, but he already knows what's going on. And so it is very much worship, and even more so than communication from our point. So we bring that to him. Verse 8. This and the first verse are my favorite ones in this chapter. He says, "Oh, taste and see that the Lord is good. Blessed is the man who takes refuge in him." I love that phrase, "Oh, taste and see that the Lord is good." Peter, in 1 Peter 2, verse 3, quotes that. Let's look there real quick. It's a little different, but it is clearly a connection with that. 1 Peter 2. We're reading verses 1 through 3. 1 Peter 2. "So put away all malice and deceit and hypocrisy and envy and all slander. Like newborn infants, long for pure spiritual milk, that by it you may grow up into salvation, if indeed you have tasted that the Lord is good." Now, this is a time of year that most of us really like. With the holiday season, you will go to dinners and parties and such, and invariably you're going to look at something on the table and say, "That looks good," and you walk over there and you grab a hold of it and you try a bite and you realize that is good. And what do you usually do? You turn to somebody that you know has similar taste to you and say, "Here, try this. You're going to like it." We've all done that, don't we? Now, every now and then, Kevin, does Tara do this to you? Well, this has turned bad. Would you want to try it? I think this milk's gone sour. You want to take a sip? Well, that happens too, but that's different.
She does that with drain cleaner and stuff.
Yeah, I bet. A little at a time. Yeah, but we try something, and it's something we've never tried before, and it's so good, and it's so amazing. We want to share that. But you know what? I can tell you how good that is, but until you are able to try it for yourself, you're not going to know. I can stand here all day and tell you how awesome, chocolate cake is. And until you try it for yourself, you're not going to understand. Or some favorite recipe. Of course, most of you know I'm going to Costa Rica next month. And I have always loved fruit. And of course, down there, being so much further south, they have fruit. They have fresh fruit pretty much year round. And two of the members there at church own papaya farms. Think about how cool that is. And so last year, me and the guy I room with, we especially liked the fruit. And so we both liked the papayas. And so we made overtures that we would love to get some fresh ones. So he went and cut one out of the field. The farmer then brought them in and cut it for lunch. And so that papaya, I'd had papaya before, and it's good, but that papaya had the texture almost of a warm, soft butter. But it was sweet, and just the flavor, the bright color of it, and just kind of, you put it in your mouth and just kind of melted in your mouth. And if USDA regulations would allow me, I'd bring a suitcase full of them, and I'd cut them when we try them. But you can't do that. You're not allowed to bring fruits and vegetables from foreign countries unless they've been processed and packaged, or else I'd do that. But you're not going to be able to taste how good that is unless you're down there able to taste some of that with me. And the pineapple is amazing.
We got one over there in Hawaii, Albert and I did.
Yeah.
We picked up one there.
The best pineapple I ever had in my life, we were it wasn't on the city square because it was a triangle, but we were on the city triangle in Jabotacatubas, Brazil, when I was on the trip down there. And they have a pineapple truck. Okay, it's not an ice cream truck, but a pineapple truck. And these guys ride around town with the pineapple truck, and if you want a pineapple, they'll pull one out and cut it up for you and hand it to you. And you just get the pineapple off the truck, like an ice cream truck or whatever. And the pineapple down in Brazil is white. It's not yellow. It's white. But you talk about, because they just got them from right outside of town. They're all over down there. I'm like, wow, There again, I'd love to take a suitcase full of those home, and bring those for people to try, but you can't because, when you buy a papaya or a pineapple at Walmart, that thing was cut many weeks ago. It was not ripened. Papayas are on a tree, but it was not ripened on the tree. But the farmer going to his field and picking it off the tree, it was ripened there, and that makes all the difference. We know how that is with apples, don't we? When you go to a place like Romney or over the Amish country or whatever and buy apples, it's way better than the apples that got picked 3 months ago and shipped by truck or whatever, because the fresh stuff that that got tree ripened, that's way better than anything else. Well, I can tell you all day about that, and now I'm ready for some papaya. But, I can tell you that, but you can't fully understand that until you've tried it yourself to see just how good that is. And like I say, I wish I could. I wish I could bring a suitcase full of it and we'd all try it and get to see how it is.
But you could do that with tomatoes. You buy a tomato at the grocery store, it's nothing like
Absolutely. They're bland, but you go out to your garden and pick one that vine ripens. Oh yeah, it's that difference. It's that same kind of difference between picking one off the vine in your garden versus buying one at Walmart. That, wow, that's awfully crisp for a tomato.
Yeah.
It's red, but it's crisp. I mean, how's that work? I don't know. But anyway, but yeah, that is very similar that way, and. But you can't know until you've tasted for yourself. Because I can tell you about anything like that, but you've got to try it yourself. And the Lord is that way. Taste and see that the Lord is good. I can tell people, and do all the time, how wonderful it is to be a Christian. How wonderful it is to lay your head on the pillow and know you're right with God. To know that if you were to die tonight or today, that you would be with Him for all eternity. I can tell you how wonderful that is, and how great it is to think that your Christian friends are eternal friends. And I can tell you that all day long. But until you've taken the plunge, pun intended, until you've taken the plunge and become a child of God yourself, and realize just how wonderful that feels. To have that taken off of your shoulders. To have that assurance to know that if I died, I'd be right with the Lord. You can't know just how wonderful that feels until you've done it. Until you've tasted and seen for yourself that the Lord is good. Kevin?
I think it's great to transition between verse 6 and verse 7. Verse 6, he's in desperation. In verse 7, God's got an angel around him. Now, Richard Van Horn taught us that about the angels.
Yeah.
The angels guard you.
Right. And, if we had more time, one of the things we could go look at is 2 Kings 6, where Elisha had the army around him, and they were going to capture him and take him, and Elisha tells his servant, go out and look, that those that are with us are greater than those that are with them. And he goes outside the dwelling where they are, and he looks, and he sees the army of God, the angelic army of God on the horizon all the way around. And so he had his angelic army surrounding, camping around him.
Have that around us all the time that we can't see, of course.
Yeah, and certainly we have that help, that protection. Yeah, that is there. Yeah, but you're right. What a beautiful transition that is.
Well, I was thinking of the same thing he was, but then when you look at that, the angel of the Lord encamps all around those who fear him.
Right.
There's stipulations to that.
Absolutely, there are stipulations.
And then he says, and he delivers them.
Right.
So we need to remember that and keep that in our mind all the time.
Yeah, we've got to fear him. And the latter part of this psalm it talks a lot about those kind of conditions that we must have. And he looks at the contrast of those that are unrighteous versus those that are righteous and the help that he gives to those. Captain?
I think sometimes we allow people to misunderstand that God encamping around us now is a spiritual sense as opposed to the physical sense that it was back then. Because it's more in the sense of Lazarus being carried in angels' wings after his death. That's our guard. God's always with us. And if we die in his service, if we die for him, the angels around us are there because we're going to go on with them.
Right. And that in no way, shape, or form, even what David writes, what David writes is intended to mean that God's going to protect us from all harm, ever. We've been looking through the book of Acts on Wednesday nights, and we're going through a chapter a week in the book of Acts. A couple weeks ago, we looked at chapter 12. James is beheaded, and then Peter gets out of prison. And so I asked, did they pray harder for Peter than James? Was James more or less righteous than Peter? Why did James die and Peter get to go out scot-free and go off and I don't think there's anything that suggests that James was any less righteous or that they tried any less hard to pray for him or anything like that. It's just that in God's sovereign choice was that James was going to be martyred for the cause of Christ, and Peter was going to stick around a while before he was martyred.
It's like now we see through a glass darkly, but then face to face. One day we'll understand if it's still important to us. It may not be if we get to heaven.
Yeah, a lot of those things that we are curious about won't be so important. For sure. Okay, verse 9. O fear the Lord, you his saints, for those who fear him have no lack. The young lions suffer want and hunger, but those who seek the Lord lack no good thing. Come, O children, listen to me. I will teach you the fear of the Lord. What man is there who desires life, who loves many days that he may see good? Keep your tongue from evil and your lips from speaking deceit. Turn away from evil and do good. Seek peace and pursue it. You know, this section is all about, doing what we should do and living and acting and saying the things that we should say. He talks about teaching others. Come, children, and I'll teach you the fear of the Lord. And so that the next generation can know what he knows. And that is the protection, the help, the strength from the Lord. He tells them to keep their tongue from evil, lips from deceit. And tells them to turn away from evil and do good, seek peace and pursue it. I think of the book of James when I read this, because James talks about taming our tongue and those things and not speaking those things. Also in the book of James, the latter part of chapter 3, he talks about being peacemakers, that we are bring about peace and that we are to bring that to other people. Also, the Beatitude, blessed are the peacemakers. Seeking peace and pursuing it. Pursuing peace, not doing, being proactive is what that's about. See, a lot of people don't really get what it means to be a peacemaker or pursuing peace. You cannot be a peacemaker with your arms folded standing off to the side. You cannot be a peacemaker if you're not engaged. Peacemakers are those that make peace. If peace needs to be made, you know what that means? There's a lack of peace. To pursue peace, to make peace, needs to be in a situation where there is a lack of peace. In other words, you come in and you help the situation be dissolved, deflected, die down. You help bring peace where there is no peace. Being a peacemaker does not mean you just stay out of the fight. In fact, it means you get into it. You wade into it to help those sort it out. Not to make the fight worse, but to bring down, to subdue the fight. Kevin?
The New Living Translation has it this way, Clint. It says, turn away from evil and do good. Search for peace and work to maintain it.
Yeah, I think that's a great way of saying it. That's exactly it. That we are to do our part to maintain, to bring about peace. And so it is important that we do that. And David does that in his life. Because you know what does David do continually? David spares Saul's life. David does not try to... David's running for his life, but he does not try to take Saul's life when he can. David does not try to escalate things. In fact, he tries to mitigate the things that are going on by allowing Saul to live and by not doing things to provoke Saul. He's just simply doing what he must do. And so we are to be the same way. Romans 12 tells us that we are to be at peace with all men, especially those that are of the household of faith. And that we are to do that, and that we, as he points out in that text, that if our enemy needs something, we give it to him. And what does he say we're doing? We're heaping burning coals on his head. We're doing that because his conscience is going to bother him. If we're doing good things for him and he's doing evil things for us, then we are seeking peace and pursuing peace. Verse 15 through the end of the chapter. The eyes of the Lord are toward the righteous, and his ears toward their cry. The face of the Lord is against those who do evil, to cut off the memory of them from the earth. When the righteous cry for help, the Lord hears and delivers them out of all their troubles. The Lord is near to the brokenhearted and saves the crushed in spirit. Many are the afflictions of the righteous, but the Lord delivers him out of them all. He keeps all his bones, and not one of them is broken. Affliction will slay the wicked, and those who hate the righteous will be condemned. The Lord redeems the life of his servants. None of those who take refuge in him will be condemned. He goes on to talk about how that the righteous are protected, that God looks on those that are righteous. His face is against those that do evil, and he cuts off their memory. But the righteous cry for help, and he hears and he delivers. The Lord is near to the brokenhearted and saves the crushed in spirit. You know, God is near and dear to those that are troubled and find difficulty in this world. And he is with them. He is helping them in all the things that they go through. And so with that, we can know that God is a deliverer. A lot of bad stuff happened to David in his life. Some of it self-inflicted. But David had God's protection and God's help with him all the way through. And we have that protection and that help, that oversight. And so that even if we do leave this life, as I think it was Kathy pointed out, that, you know, like with Lazarus, that he was carried off to Abraham's bosom. That even if it is that, even if it is in death, that God's protection is around us to take us away in his protection. And certainly we have that. That the Lord is with us and around us and within us. And certainly we can know that his ever watchful eye and his ever helpful hand will be with us. Any questions or comments? You see something that is used as a prophecy. We don't see it as a prophecy there, but about his bones. And of course, that's John 19, verse 36 quotes that none of Jesus' bones would be broken. And that doesn't look like a prophecy when you read it there in verse 20, but when John states that in John 19, that you can see that that's the case, that in talking about all these things, about how God is going to bring protection, this is certainly applying to the immediate people, to David and to others, and even to us, but that statement is made about Christ as well, that God would not allow any of his bones to be broken, and that was the case. Any questions or comments?
That doesn't mean peace, nothing bad's gonna ever happen to you. You know, when you get that conception, you're in for a lot of trouble. Because Jesus sure didn't have any peace, did he? Very little.
Right.
None of the apostles and disciples had much peace.
Right.
We get the wrong meaning of that. You know what I mean? We
It's
have to have that inner peace, knowing that we're right with God.
Exactly right. It is an inward peace, a peace within our spirit, and a peace between us and God. That's what that is. Not, you know, it may be a complete war on the outside, but it's the internal peace that we are promised, and we have that help with, and certainly is the case. I want us to remember that next week will be our next class, and the psalm we will look at is the 51st Psalm. Okay? Psalm 51. Psalm 51 is one of the most famous psalms. It is the one that David writes after he is confronted with having sinned with Bathsheba and had Uriah killed. It is a powerful psalm. Please remember we're meeting next week, next Tuesday. We've gotten out of the habit of going to lunch together, okay? I don't know about today, but I would like us to, at least if we can, maybe go out to lunch next Tuesday, if we want to do that or whatever. If someone to go today, fine. I don't think that Amy and I would, but I'd like us to not drop that habit, even though we've kind of gotten out of it. But if we could plan ahead, even some of you that don't normally go with us, we could maybe go next Tuesday and go out to lunch. We're doing next Tuesday because the other Tuesday's Christmas Eve. We're not going to meet on Christmas Eve. So we will meet next Tuesday, and then probably we need to take a break after next Tuesday for a little while. January can be a very tough month, weather-wise and what have you. Of course, February can as well. And I'm going to Costa Rica for a week and a half, so I'll be a couple times there. I'm not sure what we should do. Does anybody have any opinions on January and February in particular?
If you're ever gonna take a break, that's a good time to do it.
Well, that's kind of my thought. What about we start back up in March? What about that? We'd start back up in March. Those of you that are Oakwood Road, and I'll be in touch, but I'll always try to let Donna know. I've also been thinking too, I think we've got a good thing going here. I think this is a good class. I know that in talking even with Richard shortly before he passed away, that he wanted me to continue this class, whether he was able to teach it or not. And so certainly I want to do that with his blessing, and glad to do that. But I would like to share this with more people. And so if we take a little time off and we start back up in March, I would like to advertise it again. We advertised a little bit in the beginning. Being it's a Tuesday, we're not asking anybody to leave their congregation or anything. We're not going to try to recruit you just because you come from Oakwood Road or Norway. But it'd be good to offer it to some of the other congregations and be able to do that. It's a rare opportunity to have a class with people from different congregations. I know that's one of the good things about the ladies group that meets on Tuesday, because you're having half a dozen or so congregations be a part of that. And so maybe we can advertise it, and maybe you can do the taste and see thing for people. Say, come and try out this class, and we'll go from there. So we'll try to do that. So we'll have class next week. Let's go to lunch, and then we'll break until the second Tuesday in March. That all sound reasonable to everybody? All right. Okay, well, I will look forward to that. I'll miss this class, though, and so don't get too used to not coming. Don't let that happen, but we'll get back into it in January.